Chapter 28. The Tarnished Citadel. Everything falls to ruin in time. Buildings, towns, even entire worlds. 8th of January 2034, 7:34 AM. Fort Plank, Phobos. The Helix could hold a monstrous 21.6 million mana, but I stuck to my original plan and left when it had 500,000. I tried using my crafting skills to repair the kinetic deflection bracer, but early tests convinced me the repair would cost over 5 million mana. An intuition told me this was just too long to wait. I had no idea what was happening on Earth, or with the Chinese Jiaxin mission. With the decision made, the battle helix folded into a point, and the wasteland of Phobos unfolded in its place. I'd said all the necessary goodbyes during the weeks of apparent time, while my mana ticked up. I considered inviting Luna, but she was needed to forge a new leadership direction inside the helix. I wasn't confident that anyone else could survive even a short period on Phobos' surface. I'd not worked out exactly how portals in and out of Folded Realms worked, but I did know that once you bound a realm, you could always conjure a portal out of it at your location. It just took a few minutes of concentration. It was the rules while the realm remained unbound that were unknown. Fort Plank lay deserted just a few dozen meters away, geological survey equipment that once seemed so important laying around discarded and ignored. We'd landed on this moon about 2 weeks of real time ago, but I'd spent over 2 months in the slow time environment of the Helix. I wasn't the same woman that I'd been 2 months ago. I gave no thought to contacting Houston. Instead, I ran to the aspirant, boarded, and without even pressurizing the airlock, changed into a fresh EVA suit. The helmet was as uncomfortable as ever, but it was slightly better than breathing air through my bound Folded Realms and suffering a trickle of damage from vacuum exposure. And then, the hunt for unbound Folded Realms began. I'd been outside the aspirant a minute at most when wireframe portals rose above the horizon. Phobos is tiny, so the horizon is much closer than on Earth. Each wild Folded Realm moved slowly, but inexorably toward me. Among them was the one I dreaded the sight of, the churning mess of complex shapes that marked the entry to the S-rank Wild Realm. I scanned the other realms, looking for an octahedron that would signify a chance to complete my quest, but all I saw were the tetrahedra that marked the lesser F-rank realms. There wasn't a D-rank Q portal to be seen, which had definitely changed since the last time I was on Phobos' surface. They used to be everywhere. I recalled Shimon stating that the S-rank realm was probably chasing him through the library's access coin rather than chasing me. In binding the battle helix, had I gained enough power to attract its attention now? Reluctantly, I stepped into one of the lesser portals to prevent the terrifying realm engulfing me. The world folded into a point, and ruin unfolded in its place. Tarnished Citadel, Folded Realm, mana signature F3183412. Physical location, Phobos, near Fort Plank. Despite obvious neglect, the realm was still stunning. I stood in a field of grass, looking at one large building surrounded by 8 smaller ones. The architecture reminded me of history tours of Japan. The structures had sharply pointed tiled roofs on the top, elevated floors on the bottom, and square buildings entirely surrounded by balconies. But unlike Earth buildings, the exteriors were constructed entirely of copper. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of years of neglect had tarnished the copper with a thin coat of green. The air smelt just like the chemistry lab at my older son's school. I moved toward the central building. Through the open door, I saw an interior courtyard. And on my Glock, I entered and swept my eyes across the building and its courtyard. The main chamber was empty, covered with objects that looked like stones, if the stones were plated in copper. The place had been looted thoroughly. Tarnished copper hanging racks remained installed in the wall intact, but whatever they'd held was simply gone. The room was lit through narrow vertical windows high in the walls, each as copper-plated as everything else in this bizarre place. I crouched beside the basin and looked at the residue inside. There was dark brown mineral staining from water that had evaporated a very long time ago. This place had been abandoned for centuries, if not millennia. I kept my gun ready as I walked outside again, searching high and low for hidden threats. It took a while, but eventually I heard a crash as something in one of the 8 exterior buildings came to life. One crash became 2, 3, 4, and 5, all from the same building. I positioned my back to the wall of the building I'd confirmed was empty, watched, and waited. Their claws were the obvious threat, but the first true attack was the stench. I almost gagged at the smell of rotting meat as the 5 crab-shaped monstrosities rose to attack me. Like everything else in this bizarre realm, they were covered in copper, but somehow this metal covered jagged crystal grown into their carapaces. Nothing here made sense. Copper-coated claws clicked against the floor as they advanced, scuttling in a loose semicircle to box me in against the wall. I didn't bother with finesse. I lined up the central crab and fired one bullet directly into what looked like an eye. The cryovolcano realm no longer responded with the familiar fire and ice. I'd expected the battle helix would do something different now that it was bound, and it did not disappoint. From above the crab, a spectral angel descended wielding an electrified lance, and from below the ground, another lance reached up, passing through the ground to strike it. To the left and right of the crab, projections of red insect-like demons lashed at the crab monster with cruel claws, and directly behind it, a translucent human with fluorescent yellow hair struck home with a monstrous halberd. Pieces of the crab's shattered carapace scattered against the copper walls. In the carnage, the melee strikes also destroyed 2 other crabs I hadn't shot at. They'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time, and were sliced open by the spectres. The remaining 2 charged. I dropped one with a clean shot through its torso. These things fell easily, and unleashing a cataclysmic critical was probably overkill. The last one closed slightly too fast for comfort, and I fired point blank into the crystal growth on its back. This time, I missed, and the shot went wild. It reared, claws raised. I unfurled my wings and soared upward, and the crab clacked in irritation as its morsel escaped reach. From above, the crab was helpless as I allowed my countdown to finish, and only after the 8 seconds I fired again, watching the mana stored in the battle helix. Wait, what? It dropped only 900 as the crab was slain. Had binding a more powerful folded realm made my signature attack cost 70% less mana? I scanned my entire character sheet and noticed a significant change. The miracle of cataclysmic criticals, formerly D rank but marked as surge to B rank, had changed grade to C rank without any reference to a surge. I hadn't spotted when this had happened, but guessed it was caused by me binding the battle helix to it. I could only intuit that this meant less raw power, less mana use, and possibly different rules around timing. Whether it was possible to surge the miracle again, or whether that was a one-time thing from first encountering the system, I had no idea. The stench slowly faded as the bodies fell to the floor. Silence settled over the remaining buildings. The crab corpses were marked as copper clanker corpses. The system spoke to me again. It used Dean's voice, as always. Some taunts never changed. Combat XP gained, 3,500. Realm dominated, Tarnished Citadel. You may bind, inspect, devour, or ignore this folded realm. You may claim an F rank reward chest with a high chance to upgrade to D rank. I reached for the hiding point at the edge of reality, the same fold-in space where the kinetic deflection bracer had waited for me back in Brimfall. A small wooden chest, no larger than a basketball, appeared in my hands. It felt light. With how strong I was now, it could have weighed as much as an oil barrel, and I've hardly have noticed. The chest was decorated with the same tarnished copper that covered the 7 surviving Machia and the central pagoda, its surface etched with rows of stylized cubes, each face caught in a different angle of perspective, so the entire chest gave the illusion of shifting as I turned it. Some cubes nested inside larger ones. This didn't feel like a prize from a cruel or soulless machine overlord. Instead, it felt like a piece of art. I resolved to keep the empty chest, if at all possible. I worked the lid free. It resisted, then opened with a creaking sound. Inside, the space was far larger than the exterior of the chest. Cushioned on a bed of dark velvet sat a set of leather armor, coloured an over-the-top garish blue. Somewhere, something watching over me had decided that my poor EVA suits had been through enough, or just weren't up to the job anymore. My overlay flickered to life over it, naming the prize Cerulean Cure Buili and displaying its D rank. I read the remaining description excitedly. Provides near absolute defense against vacuum, significant defense against physical damage, strong defense against non-instantaneous elemental damage, and significant defense against instantaneous elemental damage. Will use ambient mana to self-repair from minor, moderate, and severe damage. Self-repair ceases to be reliable after exposure to extreme damage. All magical properties are suppressed while this armor's bright blue colour is significantly concealed, including through invisibility. That's weird. Maybe the system thought I hated blue and chose that last one despite me. I wouldn't call it a favourite colour, but I don't dislike it. I was also annoyed at the inconsistent naming system. Couldn't it have said C rank protection against some things, D rank against others? I was about to put the new armour on when I noticed something small below it in the same chest, an object no larger than a pea that my system overlay labelled a backpack. I touched it, and it expanded. A minute of fiddling later, and I'd worked it out. It wasn't one of the magical spatial storage units I'd read about in fiction. It was just a container that would resize to accommodate anything I put into it, and then adjust to be as easy as possible for me to carry, but I would still need to manage the weight and bulk. For the second time in hours, I changed clothes and stuffed the EV suit into my new pack. I tried to place items into the distorted space of the chest, but nothing could be placed inside it that didn't fit normally. Scouring the Tarnished Citadel realm for another hour, uncovered an F-rank mysterious treasure the system overlay described as a withered lotus, prominently displayed in a ruined glass display in one of the 7 surviving Machia. True to its name, it must have been a beautiful flower once, but now it was almost dead. I wasn't struck with inspiration for possible crafting applications for the lotus, so I planted it in a tarnished copper pot filled with local soil and placed the entire thing into my backpack. I tried to turn the backpack, and no matter what I did, the pot stayed upright. Intuition reminded me how to move the Tarnished Citadel folded realm into my folio of realities, and I moved it just outside reality without binding it. Exploration complete, I stepped into a wireframe tetrahedron. The world folded into a point, and Phobos unfolded in its place. Several hours had passed inside the Tarnished Citadel, and on the surface, the terrifying S-rank folded realm was nowhere to be seen. Mars dominated the sky, a titanic red ball so large that I could easily make out Olympus Mons, an ancient Martian volcano almost half the size of Texas, and the nearby Valles Marineras. The sight was still awe-inspiring, even after weeks spent in magical realms. Near the horizon, I spotted a wireframe octahedron, marking the other C-rank folded realm I'd need to bind to return home. I didn't hesitate, but I did draw my gun first. High above, I barely registered the dim light of an orbiting satellite. One of our supporting launches arriving with fuel or water, probably, but I couldn't rule out the Chinese astronauts orbiting to learn what had happened to us. The world must presume us dead. As the world folded into a point, and a new world unfolded in its place, I hoped the Chinese astronauts were not going to land here. Folded Dominion, besieged Devon Imperial Outpost, rank C, mana signature C22601, time factor 6:1. The portal dumped me onto a dust-covered obsidian floor, engraved with silvery glowing runes. Before I could get my bearings, a very familiar and very loud sound echoed through the surroundings. A gong. That clanging was loud. Had my presence triggered an alarm? I raised my Glock and scanned the shadows. Heavy, fluted columns of dark basalt marched down the length of the hall, supporting a vaulted ceiling that was extremely high above me. Terracotta dishes in crude iron wall brackets served as oil lamps, flickering with greasy flames. They cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. The air stank of burning fat. To my right, solid, interlocking blocks of stone, carved by hand and fitted without mortar, formed the walls. Even to my non-expert eyes, the construction screamed Roman architecture, just built on a scale that historians would have said Rome could not have achieved. Although, how much do we really know about those days? None of the history I'd been taught at school talked of Octavian as the most powerful magical warlord in all of history. If we got that wrong, surely we got a lot more wrong about those days too. A rustle of fabric announced the newcomer before he emerged from behind a pillar. A man stepped into the light of a flickering lamp, wearing a bronze breastplate polished almost to a mirror finish. He held an iron-shod spear, his knuckles white around the ash shaft. His eyes, wide and hollowed out by exhaustion, locked onto my cerulean armor and the wings tucked against my back. No, not a man. His face was human enough for me to assign a gender, was very much not human. Solidly built and considerably over 6 feet tall, he'd stand out in a crowd on Earth. Where a man would have skin, he was covered in white scales. Where a man might have a beard, he had small, white-grey tentacles. Between the bells and the armoured fighter, I was either considered an honoured guest or an invader, and I had no idea which. A harsh voice quickly clarified. Salve, Praetrix. It didn't translate perfectly, but greetings, Lady Magistrate, felt close enough. Latin didn't have a female form for the word praetor, but this society must have been isolated for 2 millennia of real time, and 12 at the speed time moved here. While I thought, the armoured speaker continued. Long have we waited for the Imperator to send word of the world outside and his glorious conquest. We remain loyal, we remain ready, we remain vigilant. The man struck his fist forcefully against his breastplate as I considered how to tell him that his god was dead. Our legion has held this outpost since time immemorial, Praetrix. Wild world beasts claw at the bronze gates. On any other day, we would host a ceremony to celebrate your arrival. But today, our commanders fight to hold, and only this lowly one is present to greet you. The system overlay that I'd never learned full control over appeared. Born Ceremonial Guard. Threat class, Farcical. Condition, unharmed. Had half-human, half-eldritch monstrosities once lived on Earth?